Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the press conference of the S&D President, Iratxe García Perez, who is going to run through the issues being covered in the plenary this week. And after she's spoken, you can ask any questions you have or get in touch via Skype. And so I'll hand the floor over to her without further ado. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. In the current plenary session, it's an extraordinary situation because, unfortunately, we were not able to hold our standard plenary session in Strasbourg, which we would all have preferred to do. But given the fact that the health situation, the health crisis in Europe is getting worse, well, we are aware of that fact, and we felt that the best decision that we could take at the moment was to hold the plenary session in Brussels to safeguard and comply with all of the health and prevention measures in order to try and protect the health of the members and staff of the European Parliament, but also bearing in mind the effects of moving so many people from one area to another. So you know that the S&D's position has been that, and we think that the decision taken is the right one, given a difficult situation with a great deal of uncertainty. Of course, we have to continue with our work, and one of the main obsessions that we have had from the beginning has been to make sure that the European Parliament should continue working. And that's particularly so given the current situation. And here I want to refer to the Council meeting held last week. If we were to try and choose a word to define that council, it would be disappointing. I am aware of the fact that reaching an agreement in July would have been a very tall order. It would have been difficult to reach agreement amongst all of the different member states about a European response. But having reached the agreement, the European Parliament welcomed the recovery plan, and at the same time sent out a clear message that given the current budget framework, it just wasn't enough, and that we therefore needed to improve the agreement. The Parliament is not asking for the moon. We are asking for programs to be strengthened, important programs which will help people and businesses to survive, and we're asking for something which will contribute to a rapid solution or rapid recovery from the crisis. And as the days go by, this is even more important and more urgent. We're also seeing that the economic force or economic effort required to overcome the crisis is going to be to grow more and more. And it's not just me saying that. Economists have also pointed out that if you bear in mind the austerity policies which have been put forward in the past, and you now look at what the IMF is saying, they're talking about a different approach in order to try and get through the current crisis. The international organizations are calling for growth-focused effort in order to make sure that we get through this. We need to support the most vulnerable sectors right now. So next generation EU, to my mind, is the most necessary instrument that we have before us right now. And this is what the Parliament has done, has said, and this is what the my group has said. The creation of the Recovery Fund is a historic step, but we can't force countries to choose between economic recovery and the rule of law. Because if we do that, we won't be focusing on the future of our political project. The European Union cannot be understood without the need to comply with rule of law. And so we feel that it's important to stress the need for an agreement on a legislative instrument which will bridge meeting the rule of law and balancing budgets. It's not a moment for fiscal consolidation. We're going through an unprecedented economic crisis, and we don't know how long that's going to last. We're at the beginning of the second wave now. So looking at the MFF, which will last over the next 7 years, we need to bear in mind current events. The interinstitutional agreement calls for a midterm review. Now, this is something we've mentioned many times. This midterm review in the MFF is essential because we need flexibility. Things can change a great deal over the next 2 or 3 years, and that's something that the Parliament has put forward when it comes to having an agreement. Flexibility, intermediate review, revision if necessary. And here I want to insist on the fact that we have outstanding negotiations with in our group, and it's the most important one. It's about principles. It's about the values that we put forward. The crisis can't be a way to undermine the rule of law and undermine fundamental rights. I met with Commissioner Reinders this morning to talk to him about this, because aside from the figures for the MFF, we also have to find a way of safeguarding the rule of law. And we need a binding instrument. This is what we've been calling for a long time now. We need this to respond to people who are saying that the Parliament is blocking an agreement. That's not the case. 2 years ago, the Parliament had a clear point about the legislative instrument on the rule of law, and we've been waiting for a common position from the Council. And we still haven't seen it yet. So we are willing to continue negotiating. We need there to be movement here, and we are aware of how urgent all of this. And we're also aware of the importance of all of the steps that we are taking at the moment. So we are going to bear that in mind. Then, of course, there are other issues which are being dealt with in the Parliament, which are this week, which are also fundamental. CAP reform. This morning, I wanted to take part in this extremely important debate. It's important for the whole of Europe. We need to make sure that the common agricultural policy fits the challenges which we're going to face. We need to protect our rural environment, but we also need to ensure that we bring young people into farming and women as well. There is a tendency for the rural economy, rural environment to be more and more dominated by men, and we need to try and make sure that more women come on board. Of course, there's a key element here, which is the environmental and social sustainability of the whole thing. The CAP reform looks at or binds 30% of what's being offered with social and environmental standards. So when I say sustainable in terms of environmental and social terms, I mean a fair CAP which guarantees fair remuneration to those working in the fields and on the farms. And that's what my group is interested in. We also have the Commission work programme. We are satisfied to see that the work programme includes important demands that we have put to Mrs. von der Leyen: social growth, the Green Deal, strengthening the social pillar, reforming the European semester. That's essential for us so that we include in the social and environmental, that's included in the social and environmental criteria. As I said, we're working on formulas to try and protect the rule of law, and also issues to do with gender equality and making those horizontal. And of course, there are other issues being dealt with in the plenary, and I'm quite willing to take questions on those. But rounding off now, I'd just like to say that though it's the last comment here, it's not less important as a result. We have to respect our freedoms, protect the schools as well. And I want to show my support for the family of Samuel Paty and all of the French people. This is a battle that we are going to wage all together, because these are our European values that are at stake here. This is not a secondary issue, and you can all count with this on the support of all of the Social and Democrat group on this issue. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'm at your disposal.
Merci Iratxe. Donc maintenant nous sommes prêts à prendre.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to questions. If anybody has questions, Catherine, you are online, I think. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I have just a short question. On the Common Agricultural Policy, I saw a very strongly worded response from an MEP from your group, Mr. Tarabella, who criticised what's being proposed on almost every level, environmentally, socially. And I'm just wondering if you've got about the way it's being handled and going through the Parliament. Do you think this needs to be delayed? It's obviously quite urgent that something is agreed, but nobody seems to be very happy with how it's being handled. And also, on the question of the common agriculture policy and fraud, we've seen some countries that it has been used in a very fraudulent way. There are many examples, but I'm just wondering if this is something that is very important for you.
Por supuesto que la.
Yes, thank you. Of course, the CAP is extremely important for us. Indeed, when I was chairing the S&D group, I was saying precisely that, and I was a member of the Agriculture Committee previously. I was a shadow on the single market for the S&D the last time the CAP reform debate took place. So it's obviously very close to my heart. I absolutely understand that there's a divergency of views. In my group, there's a divergency of views. There are very individual positions across the various delegations, and that's understandable. The same applies to all the other political groups. It's very problematic. It's almost impossible for the groups to have completely homogeneous positions on such a vital reform proposal. Having said that, we do need to hold back and not get into too much of a standoff on this, because obviously we do have our own localized interests back home, our local communities to defend, but at the same time we've got to be able to stand above all that and bring together all these 27 different perspectives to distill from that a European policy. We need to have a European policy. Therefore, we need to have a Europe-wide agreement. And this work that's been done is the fruit of months and months of tough negotiation. It's been far from easy. I'd be the first to agree that it doesn't contain all the things that the socialists would have liked to see in it. But obviously, you've got to compromise if you want to reach an agreement. Therefore, you have to make concessions. There's no way around that. But what I would say is that this is a compromise which does encompass the fundamental red lines which my group had, the absolutely fundamental principles that we have. For example, the environmental dimension. It is essential that the CAP is an integral part of the Green Deal. This is actually revolutionary. The first pillar of the CAP it requires 30% of the subsidies of the funding to be a function of environmental sustainability, and therefore 30% of the funding for projects in the first pillar has got to go into that sort of project. The same should be replicated for the second pillar. And if we could actually get all the CAP predicated on that basis, and if we could get on board all those who are working towards a better environmental future, if we could get all the livestock breeders and the farmers on board, it would be incredible. So we have to try to work as a parliament, because if all the groups are just going to bat for their own objectives, then we're going to be lost. There won't be such a thing as a parliament position. As I've said, I understand that there are inevitably going to be political divergences. There are within my group, But I would absolutely defend to the hilt position that we've come up with, because we've negotiated long and hard, and we desperately need a much more sustainable CAP. This is what the whole thing's about. That's what's at stake. Obviously, this is an extraordinary situation we face at the moment. But by the same token, we've got essential work that's got to be done. The European Parliament's got to have a position so that it can begin to negotiate with the Council, so that we can even go to the trilogues. And that is why it is so important for us to recognise that, yes, we've had to make concessions. Yes, of course, things could have been better, but the ideal can be the enemy of the good. And we've made some very substantial steps forward to a much more sustainable CAP, which we certainly feel will make a valuable contribution to tackling climate change too.
Merci, Iratxe.
Thank you very much, Iratxe. I think we had another question from David from Radio Radicale, I think. Are you online?
David?
Oui, vous m'entendez?
Oui, on t'entend.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
My question in English, because I have otherwise I have the English interpretation in my ears. Two questions, if I may. The first one on the MFF and the recovery fund. Are you ready to accept the proposals by the German presidency on the MFF and on rule of law to have the recovery fund up and running at the beginning of 2021? The second question is about the president of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. We have been just informed that after she announced self-isolation last week during the European Council, she left Brussels and she went to Germany. Do you think that it's appropriate for the president of the European Commission to go in another country after a strict contact with the person positive to COVID? I mean, we have had the case of the Irish commissioner Phil Hogan, who stepped down because of a similar situation. And I'm wondering if you think that it's appropriate for the president of the Commission to go to Germany for self-isolation and not to stay in Brussels. Thank you.
Gracias, David.
Thank you. With respect to the latter point, obviously it's very difficult for me to pass judgment when I'm not fully appraised of all the circumstances. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the background to this is. I don't know if this trip occurred, what the circumstances were, and therefore, with all due respect, I don't feel I'm in a position to pass comment on that. I don't feel it would be appropriate. What I do think is that the Commission, in the same way as this Parliament, is being extremely careful and vigilant and circumspect in how it conducts itself as an institution. And obviously everybody individually is being very careful, because we've got major responsibilities as public representatives. We are asking for very tough measures to be imposed on our societies to try to keep society safer, and therefore we have got to live by those same rules and those same standards. As I say, I don't know the circumstances behind this specific question, and therefore I don't feel I'm in a position to comment any further. As to the MFF and the Recovery Fund, and whether we can accept the proposals from the German presidency so that the Recovery Fund really could get going in 2021. Well, what we want to see is the Recovery Fund getting off the ground in 2021. Absolutely. Are we prepared to accept the proposal as it currently stands? No. So we know that it's extremely urgent. We know we want to get it off the ground, yes, but we don't want it to be in this shape and form. We need some concessions from Council. We need some movement in Council, and we need some movement towards the position that the Parliament has espoused. And I hope that in the days to come, or certainly the weeks to come, the German presidency will actually shift its position a little. both in terms of the rule of law, but also the MFF. And the sooner we can reach a watertight agreement that can be a genuine basis for the recovery fund to get going in January, the better for everybody. That's what we'd like to see.
Alors, je ne vois pas d'autres.
I don't see any further questions. Therefore, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming to this press conference and for your participation, and see you again very soon.